What movie soundtrack has no right to slap as hard as it does? Hackers, Prodigy, Orbital, Left Field, Massive Attack, etc. Love the music in this 90s classic lol. Edit. I'm so glad so many people agree with me on this. Apparently I'm wrong though, because this movie does deserve a soundtrack that slaps this hard. Also, I adore the wardrobe of the cast. This is my favorite version of Angelina Jolie, and I wish I could be as fucking cool, hot as her in this role. Edit squared. Was not expecting this response. Feels like I started my own. Hackers, Army. Thank you for the awards. Love that so many people love this music and movie. The music was written by Steven Schwartz, Wicked, Pippin, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Hans Zimmer. Inception, Batman, The Dark Knight, Dune. Steven worked on the film songs, like The Plagues, Deliver Us, Through Heaven's Eyes, Anywhere There Was a Singer. Hans Zimmer did the score, working on the overall atmosphere for music throughout the film. That means environmental music like the burning bush scene, the chariot scene near the beginning, songs without vocalists. They are both incredibly talented musicians in their own way. Combining them in this movie was magic just waiting to happen. Oh Brother Where Art Thou? Granted the movie itself is fantastic, but I'm one of those who owned the soundtrack before seeing the movie, and I'm not the only one. The film's soundtrack became an unlikely blockbuster, even surpassing the success of the film. By early 2001, it had sold 5 million copies, spawned a documentary film, 3 follow-up albums, Oh Sister and Oh Sister 2, 2 concert tours, and 1 Country Music Awards for Album of the Year and Single of the Year, for Man of Constant Sorrow. It also won 5 Grammys, including Album of the Year, and hit #1 on the Billboard album charts the week of March 15, 2002, 63 weeks after its release and over a year after the release of the film. The Tickin' Mountains really hits hard when you find out that Hans Zimmer and Christopher Nolan timed the ticks perfectly to match up with the time dilation on the planet. Each tick represents an entire 24 hours passing on Earth. They did something similar in Supermarine from Dunkirk, where they used the ticking of Nolan's pocket watch to raise tension without the audience even knowing why they're feeling so tense. I listen to a lot of Hans Zimmer music, especially Interstellar. At work, at my old job, first week in the office, boss asked me what I like to listen to when trying to drill through work papers. I said Hans Zimmer. He was stunned, and asked me if he was playing his music too loudly, showed me his phone, and that was who he was listening to as well. It's among my favorite CDs ever. Not soundtracks but CDs. I loved the movie as well. Just watching it freaks me out how long ago the early 90s were. Eddie Vedder, Stone Gossard, and Jeff Ament and Citizen Dick was always a fun part of the movie since they hadn't really blown up yet when they filmed. Cameron Crowe movie soundtracks are as reliable as Tarantino soundtracks at being great. See also, Almost Famous. I'm going to quote one of my top comments, because it kind of applies here. Seriously, if Thor, Ragnarok had less humor in it, it would be depressing as fuck. His dad dies, his long-lost sister he never knew he had destroys his hammer and claims his throne as her own by killing all of his friends. He's lost on a random planet where he's made into a gladiator slave. When he does get home, the only way to save his people is to evacuate them and destroy their home. Then, when everything seems like it might start to settle down for a bit, Thanos intercepts them on their way to Earth. Oh, and he loses an eye. But his brother isn't as much of a jerk-hole anymore, so he's got that going for him, which is nice. The soundtrack was just as critical as the humor for this movie, not just being 2 hours of super depressing content after super depressing content. I was really hoping someone else thought of this movie. Funny story, I happened to be watching this one day with the sound up very loud. I get a knock at the door, and when I open the door, 2 members of the Jehovah's Witnesses are standing there. Right at that moment the Orbital song comes on. Satan. Satan, Satan. Needless to say, we had some awkward conversation and they quickly excused themselves lol. What a great movie. The answer is always Godzilla from the 90s, has original, never-before-released songs from the Foo Fighters, arguably one of their best songs too, Ben Folds 5, Rage Against the Machine, and possibly the greatest remixed song of all time, Brain Stew by Green Day featuring Godzilla roars and a bitching new outro, especially compared to how shit the movie is. This might be the best answer in terms of disparity of film quality versus soundtrack quality. For as much as those movies were ridiculed, the soundtracks managed to snag fantastic original songs from Paramore, Death Cab for Cutie, Muse, Florence and the Machine, Bruno Mars, and Green Day, among others. Basically the only Twilight scene I've ever seen is the closing credits to the first movie because it's set to one of my favorite Radiohead songs, 15 Step, and damn, does that song actually go weirdly well with clips from a teen vampire movie. Suicide Squad, 2016, movie was trash AF, but the soundtrack is . Imagine Dragons is my favorite band, so I checked out Sucker for Pain. Not a huge rap fan, but that song slaps. Heathens by 21 Pilots slaps. Skrillex and Rick Ross go crazy on Purple Lamborghini. Panic at the Disco Kills' cover of Bohemian Rhapsody. Grace's cover of You Don't Own Me is cool. G-Eazy is okay on it. If you like Eminem, Without Me is also on the soundtrack among other older songs. Thor. The composer Patrick Doyle is a friend of the director Keith Branagh, so he did it as a favor to him. He did not score Thor 2, which only added to my disappointment of that movie, but Taika Waititi included bits of the original score in Ragnarok, which made me burst into tears, laughter when I heard the Sons of Odin, a new king theme excerpted in a pivotal scene at the end. The score for the original Thor film is outstanding, soaring. Film accompaniment. Check it out if you can. Judgment Night. Lame movie, but the soundtrack pairing the best of 90s rock bands with the best of hip-hop was amazing. Slayer and Ice-T covering a medley of 3 exploited songs, See It Lights, Mudhoney and Sir Mix-a-Lot teaming up, Living Colour and Run DMC, Sonic Youth and Cypress Hill. It was an amazing Reese's Peanut Butter Cup of an album. Dark Phoenix. I remember sitting in the theater with my boyfriend, with major superhero fatigue because he's super passionate about every Marvel and DC comic, film, TV show, and game, so of course I want to support his passions, but goddamn, I'm sitting in this theater watching the movie, thinking why have these X-Men movies all gone to shit? And then Gap starts to play and suddenly I'm like, holy shit, Hans. Did they pay you above your regular fee? Because you brought way more to this project than you needed to. Went to iTunes and bought the soundtrack right after getting out of the theater. No offense to all these comments, everyone can have their own personal opinion about things, but by any measure of that statement, the Tarzan animated movie soundtrack is the epitome of the original statement. Phil Collins won multiple awards for those songs, not to mention that the statement has no right to slap as hard as it does perfectly fits Tarzan. Who would have expected a movie about a dude growing up with gorillas to have that emotional an opening song? You expected some Jungle Book stuff. You expected to hear about the bare necessities. Instead, Phil Collins made you cry like a little bitch. Personally, I'm not even sure it's possible, if you have ever held a baby, whether that be a human or animal that you truly love, for you to hear the Tarzan opening soundtrack and not get teary-eyed. They may not fall, but the tears are there, just like all the emotions you can barely handle. I defy you to watch Tarzan and tell me I'm wrong. Also, how is someone going to say that a biblical story that was billed as a musical has no right to slap as hard as it does? The church is gospel and they have been making biblical songs for literally millennia. Why would it be unexpected for them to make some good ones in that time? Super Mario Bros. Movie soundtrack. A lot of people know how infamous the movie is, but they tend to overlook the soundtrack, which was incredible in every way. It featured a veritable who's who of 80s and 90s pop and rock artists, a twisting labyrinth of musical genres that somehow combines to create the greatest 90s mixtape you've never heard. It all starts with Almost Unreal by Roxette, a song that was originally written for the movie Hocus Pocus, literally reflected in the lyrics, I love when you do that hocus pocus to me, but repurposed for this random movie based on a popular video game. The album goes on to feature the Divinals singing a cover of Love is a Drug, George Clinton covering Walk the Dinosaur with some Mario-tinged lyrics, Goom Goom, Akalakalaka Goomba, a nice slow song with I Would Stop the World by Charles and Eddie, and finishing off side 1, I had the cassette version, with I Want You by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. It only gets better from there, as side 2 begins with Where Are You Going by Extreme, a fast-paced rock song with incredible vocals. This goes into Speed of Light by Joe Satriani, a song that is basically all face-melting guitar solo, and if you know anything about Satriani you wouldn't expect less. This is followed by Breakpoint by Megadeth. Never thought you'd ever see Megadeth associated with Mario, did you? Well, here they are. On all their heavy metal glory, loud, abrasive percussion, crunchy guitars, wailing vocals, it's all there, plus a mid-song skit that provides the album's only curse word. So how do you follow that act? Who could be so big as to top Megadeth? How about Freddie fucking Mercury? That's right, Queen shows up to do the song Tie Your Mother Down, a song that really shows you how energetic Queen could be. Finally, we end the album on a softer, funkier note with Can't Loop by Us 3. It doesn't abandon the energy of the previous 2 songs, but it lets you down gently, featuring a sampled horror track from Herbie Hancock, and a rap done with such skill and silky smoothness that you could fall asleep to it. And that is how you make a movie soundtrack. For me, there's a few, and I think they hang together pretty well, independent of their respective films. That is to say that if you've never seen the movie, you're still pretty likely to go, That's a Damn Good Song, From Dusk Till Dawn. Great front half of the movie, kind of dies in the back half, but goddamn, is that soundtrack incredible. 2 tracks by Stevie Ray Vaughan, 1 by Jimmy Vaughan, 1 by the Blasters, 1 by the Mavericks, 2 by Tito and Tarantula, both good, but Angry Cockroaches is like an incredible descent into madness, and the song She's Just Killing Me by ZZ Top, which I blasted 3 or 4 times after finding out that Dusty Hill had passed away, because it happens to be my favorite song out of all of their work. Transformers, the movie, yes, the animated one. Once you get past how poorly Stan Bush's The Touch has aged, thank you, Boogie Nights, it's an incredible soundtrack. I mean, if you take Lion's theme from the movie and strip all of the references to Transformers out of it, it's an incredible example of mid-80s hard rock. I'll just get Dare to Be Stupid out of the way, because it's the best song Devon ever recorded. Instruments of Destruction by NRG is pretty good. Nothing's Gonna Stand in Our Way by Spectre General falls into that kind of line camp of good example of its era, where it's not Dawkins or anything, but it's still damn good. By the way, Spectre General was actually a band called Kick-Axe, but played under a different name for reasons I don't fully understand. Vince DiCola's synthesizer score is a work of its time, sort of like you'd get from Harold Faltermeyer or Brad Fiedel. It's great stuff, but I think the real winner on the soundtrack, is There by Stan Bush. I'm not sure if it would work without the Vince DiCola synthesizer work going on underneath it, but there's that 30-second instrumental bit where it's largely drums, bass, and Vince DiCola, and it's my favorite slice of the soundtrack. Vision Quest, it's got Only the Young, which I think came from Journey's Frontiers sessions, so that's to say it's the band at the top of its game. It's got Change by John Waite, which is a pretty solid track. Maybe Style Council is thrown in there for representation for the new wave fans. Don Henley's She's on the Zoom is alright. Lunatic Fringe by Red Rider, Hot Blooded by Foreigner, 2 Madonna songs, including Crazy for You, which is probably my favorite of her songs, a Sammy Hagar track, but this soundtrack was my introduction to Dio with the track Hungry for Heaven. Until this came out, I honestly didn't know that it was possible to do something that was unquestionably metal, but do it with the pop sensibility. The Wraith. I mean, this film is just above B-movie trash, but the soundtrack is another one of those mid-80s bits of perfection. It's got 2 Stan Bush tracks, he's like the less expensive Kenny Loggins alternative or something, Secret Loser by Ozzy Osbourne, Definitely in my top 5 favorite Aussie tracks, 2 tracks by Lion, and maybe not as good as the Transformers theme, but still pretty damn good. Rebel Yell, Addicted to Love, the Motley Crue cover of Smoke in the Boys' Room, and a Bonnie Tyler track, way better than the movie, and I love that movie, despite the fact that it's not great, except for the racing scenes, which still hold up to this day. But, the granddaddy of soundtracks that are better than the movie they came from, Less Than Zero. Glenn Danzig and Roy Orbison co-wrote the song Life Fades Away for this soundtrack, and it's a great example of Roy Orbison's voice. There's an Aerosmith cover of Rockin' Pneumonia and the Boogie Woogie Flu, which I could kind of do without, least of all as an opener to the soundtrack. Poison covers Rock and Roll All Night, and the soundtrack is getting better. But it hits full speed when we start moving into Rick Rubin territory, with LL Cool J's Going Back to Cali, the Danzig, technically Glenn Danzig and the Power and Fury Orchestra, track You and Me, Less Than Zero, Slayer's cover of Inagada Da Vida, Public Enemy's Bring the Noise, a Black Flames track, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Juice Jones, and closes out with the absolutely fucking incredible Bangles cover of Simon and Garfunkel's Hazy Shade of Winter. This soundtrack hits so many genres that it introduced me to stuff that I'd have never heard otherwise. I really have Rick Rubin to thank for introducing me to Slayer, Danzig, LL Cool J, Public Enemy, and, via my parents, Simon and Garfunkel. The Lost Boys, track listings Good Times, with Jimmy Barnes, by INXS, Lost in the Shadows, The Lost Boys, by Lou Gramm, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, by Roger Daltrey, Laying Down the Law, from the Lost Boys soundtrack, by INXS, People Are Strange, by Echo and the Bunnymen Cry Little Sister, themed from Lost Boys, by Gerard McMahon, Power Play, by Eddie and the Tide, Eddie I Still Believe, by Tim Capello, Beauty Has Her Way, by Mommy Callis, Mommy Calls to the Shock of Miss Louise, by Thomas Newman. They used that kinda wrong here, but when something slaps it means it's really good. Whether it be music, food, anything. If it slaps it's good. However, I've never really heard anyone say something slaps hard. I've heard Go Hard Like This has no right to go as hard as it does. Okay, I actually can't remember if the word is hard or not, but I think it is. But yeah, you don't say this has no right to slap as hard as it does. I'm gonna say Lord of the Rings, because even though those movies are dusty and long as hell, the music is still so good all these years later. The Ride of the Rohirrim, the fracking refridging of Narsil? That shit does its best to vindicate 9 hours of LARPers and chainmail walking around. Also, I just realized that the refridging of Narsil and Into the West are the same melody. Paris, Texas. I watched the movie during a very vulnerable time in my life in my junior year of high school due to a very public breakup at that particular school, serious problems at home and my only group of friends graduating a year before me since they were seniors, so the soundtrack got me through a lot at that point in time and it still holds a special place in my heart. Judgment Night. The movie is forgettable. The soundtrack is the only album to successfully pair grunge and rap artists. The fact that the bands involved were at their peak made it even more unlikely. Awesome. One of my all-time favorite CDs. You had Collabs by Helmet and House of Pain, Teenage Fan Club and De La Soul, Living Colour and Run DMC, the titular Judgment Night by Biohazard and Onyx, Slayer and Ice-T and Other Body Murdered, Faith No More and Booyah RIBE. I Love You, Mary Jane, Sonic Youth and Cypress Hill, Mudhoney and Sir Mix-a-Lot, Dinosaur Jr. and Del the Funky Homo Sapien Therapy, and Fatal and a grand finale by Pearl Jam and Cypress Hill. Romeo and Juliet from the 90s, great Radiohead song, sneaky challenger to Pulp Fiction and Swingers for that decade. Otherwise, Magnolia, Go Thinking Matrix Fight Club, but that was mostly a score plus the Pixies.